North Carolina Sports Network presents This Was Then. Exploring North Carolina's rich sports history with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee. Presented by NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state. Episode 1. Jay Venuto, a visit with the former Deacons quarterback and ACC Player of the Year.
Welcome to This Was Then on the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm Todd McGee, and along with Tim Peeler, today we are speaking with ACC legend Jay Venuto of Wake Forest.
Hey Jay, this is Tim Peeler with This Was Then. Thank you so much for being on here. Just about every decade in the 8 decades of the ACC, there's a football season that comes out of nowhere. Nobody expects it. Nobody knows nobody could have predicted what you guys did in 1979 during your junior year at Wake Forest, during a great and remarkable career that you had there under John Makavic. And it's one of those eras of ACC football when there was a lot of transitions going on. So I'd like to hear from your thoughts about going to Wake Forest and what the ACC was like. South Carolina had gone, Georgia Tech was coming in, but it was only 7 teams in the league, far different than what we're looking at these days.
Yeah, it certainly is. I grew up in southern New Jersey. My father was my high school football coach. He played football at Guilford after getting out of the Marine Corps. And after his days at Guilford, he got a chance to play with the Washington Redskins in 1952. My mom was a cheerleader at Guilford, and that's how they met and migrated up to southern New Jersey. Dad was from Philadelphia. Mom was from Cape May, deep southern Jersey. And he was my high school football coach. And I know at some point in his career, he did get his master's at UNC Chapel Hill and ran the pool back in, I think, 53, right next to Kenan Stadium. So after visiting Temple, Rutgers, and some of those northern schools, even Maryland, I knew I wanted to go somewhere on Tobacco Road. So I chose Wake Forest because they were throwing the ball a little bit more than NC State was running the veer back then. North Carolina had more of a running quarterback than throwing, and I knew I wasn't a runner, that I preferred to throw the ball. So when I visited Wake Forest, I just fell in love with the campus. Everyone talks about the high academics, but the more I learn about the ACC, everyone has high academics. So it was a comfort fit for me. I wanted a campus that was self-contained. I didn't want to have to go through someone's backyard to get to football practice, some of those larger schools. So it worked well for me, and the reason I chose it was it was very comfortable. And I knew my parents could come and see me, even University of Virginia when we played there, or Maryland. So every trip wasn't going to be a long haul for them.
Wake Forest is one of the smallest schools in Division I football. It is a place where you have to feel comfortable, a place where, it's a cozy campus for big time college football. But it has had success, and nothing was quite like that 1979 season, your junior year.
Yeah, there was no question. A lot of guys that were instrumental in that program in those few years were from up north, and I know a lot of them from Philadelphia area, North Jersey. Some of my best friends, they all wanted to go to Penn State. If Penn State didn't offer them, they were headed south. So fortunately, Penn State didn't reach out and tap a lot of the good linemen we had, Sid Kitson, Billy Yard, a lot of the great linebackers we had out of Philadelphia area. And where I grew up in southern New Jersey is considered the Delaware Valley. So that all ties in with the Philadelphia football player. So once I got to campus and realized we had some other South Jersey, North Jersey football players and some players out of the Philadelphia area, it became more of a comfort zone. And immediately we had things to talk about, who was the best team in the area and so, and a lot of the names I was familiar with from all-star teams and so forth. So again, it felt very comfortable, even with the players, along with campus.
You don't get on the field. Your team goes 1-10. Your second year, fires a coach, new coach comes in, Coach Makavic. You go 1-10 again. So heading into your fourth year, what were your expectations, and what was the expectations around the team?
We'll go back to 1978, Makavic's first year. My best friend, Sid Kitson, who played lineman for the Green Bay Packers for 4 years and 1 year with the Cowboys, he was my freshman roommate. He was a tight end. In that season, 1978, I redshirted, and he was leading the ACC in receptions after 4 games, not just for tight ends, for all receivers. And they moved him. Jim McNally, the great offensive line coach from Cincinnati Bengals, was our offensive line coach, and moved Sid from leading the ACC in receptions to making him an offensive tackle. That's 6'5", probably 230, 235. But he left Wake Forest 6'5", 270. So there were some guys that they were experimenting with on that 1978 team, which was Makavic's first year. And in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't play. They redshirted me because obviously they thought, I didn't think, but they saw something in me. I was just mad and had a chip on my shoulder and wanted to prove a point the whole practice and the whole fall working with the scout team against the first team. But those guys all needed a year to develop. And even if I were the quarterback in 1978, I don't think the team was ready to do anything. They were all maturing. They were all put in positions that they weren't comfortable with. They had to gain weight. And that goes for some defensive linemen. We moved wide receivers to defensive back. And the continuity wasn't there to win games. But you can see it was a talented bunch. It was just a matter of a little more cohesiveness and a little more practice and a lot more weightlifting and gaining weight.
Hey folks, David Glenn here. Want a taste of real North Carolina competition? Hit up the Whole Hog Barbecue Series. It is Pitmasters versus Pitmasters all across our state. Wood, smoke, and whole hog flavor you will never forget. Get the full schedule at wholehogbarbecue.com. That's wholehogbarbecue.com, and I will see you there. From Friday night lights to championship moments, the North Carolina High School Athletic Association makes it all happen. Supporting student athletes across the state, the NCHSAA is the heart of high school sports in North Carolina. Learn more and get involved at nchsaa.org. That's nchsaa.org. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association, where champions are made.
Our guest tonight is Jay Venuto, former Wake Forest quarterback. Now, Jay, I don't want to sound negative in hindsight or anything, but you were 1-10 in 1978, and if I read it correctly, you had 7 road games in the 1979 season. You had to go to Georgia, to Virginia Tech, to North Carolina, to Auburn, to NC State, at Clemson, I believe, and at South Carolina. Is that correct?
One of those was home. Auburn was home. The year before we played Auburn down there and had a nice showing.
It's hard to think about a whole lot of optimism going into a schedule, especially at that time with those teams on your schedule. What was your mindset? What was the team's mindset going into that season?
A lot of us came to Wake Forest because of the schedule. Our freshman year, they played Michigan up in Michigan, who was number 1 in the country. So that was the coaches back in 76, 77. That was some of their recruiting talk, is that the games that we were going to play. And we knew at that time we're going to Georgia. We knew we were going to Michigan. And we knew we were going to Purdue. And that was a drive to get us to come, as opposed to maybe Rutgers or some other local schools, Temple up north. I don't think we looked at the schedule and worried too much about it. I think we're all worried about what we could do individually. Makavic was probably the most positive person I've ever met in my life, even at that time and until to this day. And he got us to believing in that we could play, that we were football players just like everyone else, and that we had talent. Now, we didn't know we had talent because we haven't played anybody and haven't won any games in the past. But there's a few guys that were captains: Sid Kitson, Mark Lancaster, James McDougall. And we were all in the same class together, and we would sit in each other's rooms a couple times a week and talk about how can we change Wake Forest. Now, those guys were playing, and I'm just sitting on the sidelines going, well, I can't say much, but hopefully if I get my turn, I could be part of that and help change the whole complexion of Wake Forest football. That's what we were thinking about, and we barely got by Appalachian State on the first game. I was terrible. I later in life, I realized I was about ready to get pulled and maybe would have never played again. And at the last minute and a half, I throw a touchdown pass to win the game. Next week is Georgia. Now, Georgia, everyone's telling us is going to beat us 60-0, but Makavic kept building confidence in us. So Wednesday before that game, I throw a pass, and my thumb hits the forehead of a helmet of a defensive player, and I didn't practice the rest of the week. I couldn't grip a football before the game in Georgia. My dad drove all the way down from New Jersey to Athens and saw me on the sidelines. He says, "What's wrong?" He says, "I can't grip the football. I can't throw." I told him what happened, and he's almost in tears because this is why he came down to Athens, to see what I could do. The first pass I threw was intercepted and run back for a touchdown by their All-American defensive back, Scott Warner. So I'm coming off the sidelines, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't do it. I can't throw. That was my thumb. And before I got to the sidelines, John Makavic said to me, it's the greatest lesson I've ever learned in my life. He said, that wasn't physical mistake. That was a mental mistake. Now get your butt back out there and play football. And we drove down. I threw a touchdown pass on that guy. And the next time we got the ball, we went down. I threw another touchdown pass against the guy. And the most embarrassing thing was the next year on the cover of one of those pre-college football magazines had him running down the sideline with the ball that says Wake Forest football on it. So everyone knew who threw that football. And all my buddies harassed me all summer long. But we end up winning. Now, Wake Forest previously, when we were in a close game like that, they kicked a field goal. They attempted a field goal with 5 seconds left by their All-American kicker, and the ball fell 3 feet short. Now, probably the 30 years prior to Wake Forest, that ball would have gone through, and it would have been a moral victory. And that's the first time that I can recall, and most people that tell me about it, that Wake Forest actually won a game, and it wasn't a moral victory. It was a victory. And I think that changed the whole complexion of what we thought about ourselves. We got back on campus. The campus greeted the buses, and we never saw the students at Wake Forest act like that before, actually bonding with football players. And it was something that I'll never forget.
Final score of that game was 22-21. What was the deciding part before they attempted the field goal that they missed?
Yeah, we were down, and I think there's maybe 8 or 9 minutes left in the game, and we threw a touchdown. I threw a touchdown pass to James McDougal, and that got us ahead of them. Then we just played great defense. They got the ball down to the 1-yard line and fumbled on a quarterback sneak, and we recovered. So everything that could go right that season went right. Now, credit to John Makavic. He would always say during the week, somebody in this room will make a play to win the game for Wake Forest. And I think he said that so much that people were looking around the room saying, well, this week I'm going to make the play to win the game. And just the confidence, and you could start seeing, and of course, after a big victory like Georgia, everybody walked differently, everyone talked differently, everyone practiced differently. And I think that was the beginning of what we would like to think, the culture that we started building at Wake Forest for others to follow.
Now, a couple of games later, y'all go into Chapel Hill to play North Carolina. Obviously, everybody in North Carolina wants to beat the Tar Heels. They're undefeated, ranked in the top 15 in the country. How did y'all convince yourselves you could win that game?
By that point, we didn't think anybody could beat us. NC State, we played them in a rainstorm our fourth game, and we lost 17-14. And we had the ball late in the game, and just the slop of the weather hurt us. But we thought that we were a better team than NC State that time. That was our only loss going into North Carolina. When my dad and brother drove me down from New Jersey down to Wake Forest, we stopped at Kenan Stadium. And Pop said, wouldn't you like to play here someday? I'm like, yeah, man, I would love to play in this stadium someday. So they came down. My brother played at University of Delaware, and they were off that week. So he came down, my dad. And I saw him before the game. And Dad said, he said, Jay, remember when we stopped here? I said, I sure do. You got a chance to play in Kenan Stadium. He said, look at all those people. They're here for one reason, to see what you can do, because they heard your name. They know what Wake Forest is all about. And that kind of lit a fire under me. Needless to say, the first pass I threw was intercepted. And usually, like when I play golf, if I do something bad early, then I'm not playing nervous. I just play. And that's what happened. And our defense probably won the game for us. I mean, we moved the ball offensively, but they stuffed Famous Amos. And I mean, they stuffed those guys. And they still almost beat us. But it was like, we didn't beat them. They almost beat us. And that was the attitude. And next week we played Auburn, and boy, they're still talking about that in Bermuda, Run, and Clemens.
Yeah, let's talk about that Auburn game. Y'all were losing, I believe, 38-20 at halftime, something like that. And
Yes.
then defense shut them out, and you guys came roaring back. What was that game like? What was that comeback like?
Well, Makavic at halftime had a mantra he's been using about never giving up. And we knew Sports Illustrated was there doing a kind of a feature article on us. And so his halftime was just never give up and play. You can come back. Your offense is strong enough to come back, but defense, you're going to have to stop them. But a lot of that we never thought about. You're kids, you're 18, 19, 20 years old. You're half listening to the coach anyway. But it was so ingrained in us because he said it all the time. It wasn't just a halftime speech that got us. I mean, it just reminded us what our mantra was and what he always preached. And we just went out and played. I don't think we did anything different in the second half that we did in the first half, just executed a little bit better. But they are still talking about that. I belong to Bermuda Run Country Club, and everybody I play with, I was at that Auburn game. That was the greatest football game I still have ever seen. And it really was. I mean, it was just a lot of fun to watch. And when both teams score that many points, the quarterback has a tendency to get a little relaxed, because you can make a mistake knowing that, okay, you can get it back. It's those tight ball games where if you make a mistake and lose a possession, you might not ever, get that opportunity back again. So that was a high scoring game, and it was just going back and forth until they didn't score anymore and we kept scoring. But people still talk about it. I mean, my wife works in the Deacon club for Wake Forest. And everyone calls. She says, are you related to Jay? He says, I'm his wife. And they'll say, that Auburn game. And she'll come home and say, 5 calls today, that Auburn game. So it still sticks in everyone's mind.
It was an odd time in the ACC. It was an unbalanced schedule. You had Clemson and Maryland you were getting ready to play, who had finished 1-2 in the league in 78. You still had South Carolina on the schedule, but they weren't an ACC team for some reason, and maybe you know exactly why. I don't. Wake Forest and Virginia played 5 league games that year. Everybody else played 6 league games. But it was a time when it's much like it is now. You're not playing on the same level of competition because you're not playing everybody in the league. What do you recall about that in terms of why it was that way?
I don't know why it was that way, but what Makavic told us, and back then the standings weekly showed that. But now I go back and look at the standings 40 years back, and it's not the same. We were technically 4-2. So the league said by us playing Virginia Tech instead of Virginia, that would be our other ACC game. I think North Carolina had that with Wake Forest a few years back that they played, but it wasn't a league game.
Right.
But this one with Virginia Tech actually counted as a league game. So everything's showing now that we were 4-3 or 3-2 when we were 4-2 because that Virginia, and I think Virginia had a game like that too, to give them an opportunity to have the same amount of games played within the ACC.
Yeah, Virginia's game with Virginia Tech also counted in the ACC.
Were they with Tech? Mm-hmm.
So Virginia Tech, that's really, I think that's the first year you can say they were part of the ACC, even though they really
Yeah,
weren't.
they were. But you're right, with just a small 7-team conference or 8-team conference, but they were all powerhouses. Maryland was ranked 20th in the country the week before we played them. North Carolina was ranked. Georgia was ranked 12th. NC State was ranked. That beat us. And interesting, a young guy, this had to be 15 years ago, I read something on a blog, and he was working for the Charlotte Observer. And he said something about the ACC being weak that year, and that's why Wake Forest and Jay Venuto had such a great year. So usually I don't say anything, and my dad got mad at me because I wrote him back. And he says, "Why? Just who cares?" I said, "Well, I cared because he wasn't even born when we played, and he's criticizing our team. I don't care about me, but our team." So I said, I went through. I said, North Carolina, they were ranked and they beat Michigan in the bowl game, and just kind of went through the litany of what those teams and how powerful they were in the ACC at that time. And I think he got it. And Walt Burrows was still his mentor, and Walt wrote me back. Well, not Walt Burrows. Who was the guy from out of Charlotte Observer?
Ron Green.
Even older than that, I think. Anyway, he says, "Yeah, Jay, you're right. I need to have a talk with him."
Well, the ACC was anything but weak then, but what was weak was college football's attempt at creating excitement in the postseason. The bowl games had not developed that time. The ACC at that time had hardly ever had more than one bowl representative, and it was one of those weird years. NC State caught a couple of games here and there, ended up 5-1, was the ACC champion, and did not go to the bowl game. Is one of the, I believe, 5 times that NC State's won the ACC championship and did not go to a bowl. But that's what was odd about college football at the time. There was only a couple of opportunities to go to bowl games.
That's true, and I think I remember the Auburn game. They even Orange Bowl was there, and there was no tie-ins. It was just whoever a bowl wanted to go after. And I think Arnold Palmer had a lot to do with us going to the Tangerine Bowl, him being in Orlando with Bay Hill. And I think he really worked it pretty well. And we sold more tickets than they gave us. So it was nice for Wake Forest to go. I think without Arnold, I know we had an offer to go to the Gator Bowl and some other bowls, but for some reason, Makavic wanted to go to the the Tangerine Bowl for the opportunity for the kids to have fun in Orlando, which we did.
And it was the first bowl game
at that year.
Pardon me?
There were 15 bowl games at that year.
Yeah, there wasn't many. I think just a few. I know North Carolina went to the Gator Bowl. We went to Tangerine. I think Clemson may have gone to a bowl, and that might have been it.
Yeah.
And that was the first bowl in 30 years for Wake Forest. So that was clearly a big deal for the Deacons fans.
It was. I think they were in their 49 or 48 Gator Bowl, and it was a long time coming. And, it wasn't a fluke season. This is what I tell everyone. Of the 11 guys we had on offense, 7 of them either played or had a chance to play in NFL. I mean, Wake Forest in 1979 was 7 NFL ball players on the offensive side of the ball. 3 of our linemen played 5 years or more in the NFL. So those guys that all were different positions who migrated down to play offensive linemen and put their hands on the ground turned out to be great ball players, even later on in life. So it wasn't a fluke. We had talent and we could compete.
People would look at your 1980 season and say, well, Wake's 5-6, which was probably a big deal for Wake back then. But 4 of the games you lost were by 3 points or less. I mean, y'all were right there on the verge of having another special season. Do you think more about that season or the 79 season?
More of the 80 season, because I think all the games we won by a few points in 79, we lost in 80. But we had a mature team in 79, and going back to Makavic's credo, someone at the end of the game will make a play to give Wake Forest the victory. The next year we had young guys playing, and we're playing South Carolina, and we're winning down in South Carolina the last game of the year. And we're up 39-32 or 30-32 or something, and they throw a Hail Mary pass that bounces off our defensive back's helmet, goes up in the air, and the receiver catches on a dead run. And then they go for 2-point conversion and win, and we never really got the ball back. So that was a difference in maturity of guys making plays and guys just couldn't make plays at the end of a game.
Need insurance? Go to a team that's got your back. The Lawson Insurance Group, run by the Lawson brothers, right here in Raleigh. They deliver real service, smart protection, and the kind of trust that's hard to find these days. Find them online by searching Lawson Insurance Group. That's LAWSON, Lawson Insurance Group, and tell them DG sent you. Hey, y'all, David Glenn here from the North Carolina Sports Network. When I'm in Wrightsville Beach, my go-to hangout is Jimmy's, the best local bar for sports fans, live music, cold drinks, and coastal vibes. No matter your favorite team, Jimmy's Bar is the place that sports fans from all across the Carolinas can call their home away from home. The next time you visit Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach, tell them DG sent you.
For those out there here on This Was Then podcast here today with Todd McGee and Tim Peeler and our guest Jay Venuto, South Carolina had a running back that year who ran over everybody in college football and won the Heisman Trophy. George Rogers was an amazing running back that was his senior year, if I'm remembering.
Yes, yes, it was.
Who running against an NC State linebacker earlier that year, ran into him, split his helmet in half, and they then tried to pull each other down. I'm not sure who won that battle, but helmets were broken, and that was not an atypical thing for a game with George Rogers. And I'm sure, I don't know if he's the one who scored that 2-point conversion or not, but South Carolina in 1980 was a big deal.
No, he was a monster to tackle. You know, when you're big, strong, and fast, it's tough to handle. But just think of who, we played in that 2-year span. You got Lawrence Taylor,
right?
ACC Player of the Year, Jim Richter the year before, Outland Trophy winner, Heisman Trophy, George Rogers. I mean, there was a lot of talent week in and week out in those games we played, which made it really exciting because you want to see the best. My dad used to always say to me, and I went into coaching after playing football. He said, "How do you know what somebody that's good if you've never seen good before?" So when you see Rogers and Richter block and Lawrence Taylor play linebacker, then okay, later in life you say they're the best that's ever played at their positions at that time. And now you can compare other people if you're trying to recruit them than what a good player is supposed to look like.
I don't think we can talk about the past of college football without talking about what college football is today. And it's dramatically different. But also, if you look in 1979, 1980, 45 years ago, almost 50 years ago, if you were standing there as a junior quarterback in your sophomore or your junior season and think about 45 years prior to that, you're talking about college football in the 1930s where there were a couple of dominant teams and everybody else was trying. The evolution of the game is constant, and it was vastly different for you from what those then, and it's vastly different now than what you remember or what it was like when you played.
Yeah, it certainly is. One thing for sure, and I saw this maybe 10 years out of playing, that I came across Lavelle Edwards' BYU playbook. And he was probably the first person to really throw the ball like they're all throwing now. And with John Makavic at Purdue as offensive coordinator prior to coming to Wake Forest, he copied Lavelle Edwards' BYU system. And when he brought it to Wake, and just randomly I saw BYU booklet, Lavelle Edwards' playbook, and we actually called the plays the same as BYU did. So there's probably 3 to 7 teams in the country that threw the ball 35, 40 times a game. Now everyone does it, unless you're running a wishbone like Army, and it might just be Army now. So it has changed.
You set the ACC or the Wake Forest record with 28 completions, I think, during your career. Is that correct?
Yeah, twice against South Carolina in that last game and against East Carolina. But yeah, and we probably throw the ball 35, 40 times a game and complete 22 to 23 on average. So it was a lot of fun to play in that offense. And that's the reason I went to Wake Forest, hoping they'd have an offense like that. But it took 3 years for that to actually come to fruition. Me sitting on the sidelines, wanting to play, probably wasn't ready to play, got mad, didn't want to transfer anywhere, didn't have anywhere to go. All my buddies were at Wake Forest. So I pouted for about 2 days when they told me that I was competing in 1970, I was competing for the starting job. I was probably 1.5 and had such a abysmal preseason scrimmage that 3 freshmen passed me. And I got demoted to like 5th or 6th team. And 2 days after that, Makavic called me in to redshirt me. And like, redshirt, I'm not staying around. I'm just going to go ahead and graduate. Then I started learning more about the offense, started lifting weights, getting stronger, losing some weight, gaining some confidence. And I stayed and things worked out. But, I think a lot of players have a chip on their shoulder, and that gives you the extra incentive to work a little bit harder than you thought you actually could.
I read
Jay,
the
in
story.
2013, you were selected as Wake Forest's ACC legend. What did that mean to you to get that kind of recognition?
I am old enough now. It took a while, but I'm old enough now and been through college coaching to realize that the quarterback's always going to get the glory for having a great season. And every time I get with my buddies, my lineman friends, and anyone on Facebook, that's what I tell them now. Before I used to tell the story about what I had to do to put myself in position to play and compete at quarterback and then have success. And it was all about, the questions were always, well, how did you come out of nowhere to be, lead the team? I said, well, the team was ready for me. And I alluded to that earlier in 78. The guys are bigger, stronger, could block Clemson, could block South Carolina, could handle Georgia and Auburn. The year before, I would have been on my back every pass play, and it's hard to do anything on your back. And so I know it was all those guys, me being ACC Player of the Year. Yeah, we had nice stats and everything, and I was maybe what people perceived as the impetus. But I always thought I was impetus, but now I just tell them it was all the the players that developed and matured, which is the truth. But deep down, I always thought I had something to do with it. And I always try to pride myself on, even at 67 years old, is try to make other people around you better at anything in life. Your kids, your family, your friends, uplift them somehow. And I think that was the catalyst I offered. They believed in me and I believed in them, but I thought that I could be something different.
You did walk into the offensive coordinator's office prior to your junior year, and he asked you who should be the starting quarterback. You had a pretty simple answer for that, right?
I did. And we'll go back to that Saturday. I sprained my ankle during midweek practice. And back in the day, they gave you a red MASH unit shirt to wear, a jersey. And I wore it the whole week. And Makavic comes over to me on the sideline Saturday before the scrimmage and says, Jay, where's your MASH shirt? I said, it's in my helmet. He says, put it on. I said, I'm not wearing it today. I'm playing. He says, you're not playing today. What do you think, that you take the whole week off injured and you're going to play today? I'm like, well, that's why I took the whole week off, so I could play today. He says, you're not playing. So that's, the year before he told me I wasn't any good, and I went from 1.5 to 6. So I'm like, oh, here we go again. So I said, you know what? I'm a senior, realistically, 21 years old. I am going to be a thorn in his butt until he puts me in. So I was elbow to elbow with him up until like the third quarter of the scrimmage, end of the third quarter. And every time somebody do something wrong, I just look at him. And he got so fed up with me, and he never cursed. He got so fed up, he says, dang it, if you think you can do better, get in there. So I just ran in there, and he said, but I'll tell you one thing, if you don't take them down for a touchdown, you'll never play another minute at Wake Forest football again. I'm like, holy cow, but I'm on the field. So I go into the huddle, and I told you 3 of my best friends are linemen. I'm like, boys, this is what Makavic just told me. So we're going down to score, or Jay Boy, your buddy, will never get to play another play at Wake Forest again. So we went down and scored, and I kind of gave him that glance as soon as the guy crossed the goal line to the sideline, like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you for a long time. And so when they called me in, Mike Working, who became the head coach at Appalachian State, called me in, and he said, who do you think should be the starting quarterback? And I'm like, to myself, I've known for about 3 years now, but I'll tell you me today. So I was very definitive with that one, but it was a good story.
Well, when the story ends with, and the 1979 ACC Player of the Year is Wake Forest Jay Venuto, it turns out pretty well.
It did. And prior to that, even our old gold and black newspaper had me on the front page with a shot of the freshman All-American quarterback coming in, which was Makavic's top recruit, ready to beat me out. And our own newspaper, college newspaper, said, how long will Venuto last? So they asked me, how long do you think I'll last? I said, I'm the starting quarterback, and I don't plan on relinquishing the job ever. So I think everyone got the message then. I might have even convinced myself that was true, but I just said it anyway.
Todd and I will both tell you, never trust the college newspaper. where we met each other in 1985, served as a sports editors, some of the glory days of NC State athletics, and embarked on careers in journalism, but still don't trust the student newspapers.
Yeah, Jay,
I didn't buy into it anyway, which was good.
Jay, we really appreciate you talking with us tonight. And before we wrap up, I do have one question I want to ask you. Where is the stash?
I'm going to tell you about the stash. When Makavic called me in, and I went from 1.5 quarterback to 6th, but he said, I still want you to be involved. I'm like, what does that mean? He says, you'll be on the sidelines and dress. You will not be up in the stands hooting and hollering with the fraternity guys and girls. You'll be standing right next to me charting plays, because I want you. We're not going to redshirt you if we don't think anything of you. So you will learn, you will stand next to me, and you'll write everything down that I say and plays and whatnot. So I'm like, crap, who does that I know? Like Terry Hanratty. So I tried to grow the Fu Manchu, figured I was going to have a ball cap on the sidelines and write everything down. Well, this part never came in. So just the mustache stayed, because I guess the Manchu part never came in. So that's how the mustache got started. And it was kind of a mockery of my positioning of going to be the chart play guy with a ball cap on and just stand there a whole game.
Well, the stash was a beautiful thing to see, especially
everyone had back then.
Jay, it was a great pleasure to talk to you tonight. Todd, do you have another question or two you'd like to ask?
No, I just, again, echo what Tim said. We really appreciate you coming on and reliving your glory days and bringing us inside the story of that great 1979 Wake Forest football season.
Awesome, guys. I appreciate the invite, and always happy to share stories, and maybe someone out there has a little interest, and maybe it may change some youngster to play hard, and you never know what can happen.